Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Bamboo Podcast. Today we have Justin Butler from You Walk Bail Bonds. He's a good friend of mine. He's our neighbor here at Bamboo Detroit, and I want to bring you guys really innovative people in the city of Detroit, and I thought he was one of them. You may see them on commercials or driving down I-75. I know that they are responsible for keeping up a stretch of that highway. So I just wanted to bring Justin onto the show, talk to you guys. So Justin, how did you just kind of give me a background about who you are? Just pretend like everyone else is a fly on the wall. You and I are just going to talk and tell me, a little bit about your background, things like that.
All right, I have been in the bail bond business now for about 16 years. I got into the business actually because my family's been in the business in the metro area now for 35 years. My company, You Walk Bail Bonds, has been around for 11 years, and we've done business here in Detroit all of that time. Bail bonds, for those who don't know it, is basically an insurance that guarantees here at court. So when someone gets arrested and goes in front of the judge has to decide whether or not they believe that the person's going to appear at court. If the judge believes there might be any doubt that the person might appear at court, then they'll set bond. At that point, if the person either doesn't have the money or doesn't want to put up the money directly themselves, they come to a business like ours. As long as we feel comfortable that they're going to go to court, we put up the bond for them. And as long as they go, they didn't have to put up the full amount of the bond. We made a little money for doing it, and everyone's happy. At that point, though, if they don't go to court, then it's our job to locate them and bring them back to the court. If we can't do that, then we lose the bond that we put up in the first place.
Right. So you said 16 years. I mean, a lot of people, they have family businesses, they decide not to go into them. Why exactly did you decide to continue on the legacy here?
To be honest with you, it was something I was good at. And so coming out of high school and college, I always liked business. I had always been around it, and I was good at it, and so it was just a natural fit, and I just stepped right out and did it.
I mean, it takes a lot of balls, though, doesn't it? I mean, to step out on your own. I mean,
well,
what kind of encouraged you to do that?
I didn't go right away. I worked for my father for several years, but after working for him for a handful of years, 4 or 5 years, I was young and wanted to be a little more aggressive than he did. And, just like anybody in their early 20s, I felt like I knew it all. And so probably, more courage than smarts at that point. But, you go out and do it, and you kind of figure your way through it.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of entrepreneurs here in Detroit. And is there any reason why you decided to stay here besides going somewhere else? Was there ever the temptation to leave and go to, like, Chicago or some other place? I know you guys had expanded to other states.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right after I started the company, we actually opened our second office down in Toledo, and that was meant to be an exploration of the other markets. Even as far as 10 years ago, I was concerned about the viability of the area, and that led us out into, at our heights, we were in a dozen states with about as many offices, and throughout that time, nothing really ever matched the city, and even at its worst areas, 4 or 5 years ago, it just always seemed to offer the comforts of home, and we were dedicated to being part of the solution over part of the problem. It's actually what brought us downtown, and so we always gave a couple of years, hey, listen, we're going to stick it out a couple more years, we're going to stick it out a couple more years, and it always seemed a little better than it was a couple of years before, and so here we are, almost 5, actually it is 5 years now we've been in the city, and, we're happy we're here, and we're happy we stayed, and we actually closed down everything else just to be able to focus here, that we feel that there's so much opportunity here that we don't need to look at other states, we just focus right here.
So you said dedicated to the solution. I mean, explain to people how, your company is like a solution for Detroit's like growth and potential, moving forward. Because I don't think a lot of people probably see it that, they probably don't know a lot about your business and exactly how it works.
Sure.
Explain to me how you feel that way.
Absolutely. Most people don't know about what we do unless you get involved with it. And so you're right. Most average people don't know what we do. But it was our opinion that most of what ails Detroit really started at the base level with the court system and holding people accountable. And people were out and committing crimes and almost running lawless, and not for a lack of desire of people in power positions wanting to do it, but not necessarily knowing how. And businesses aren't going to come to the city, they're not going to open up, people aren't going to come visit the city if they can't come here and do it in a safe environment. And the other release mechanisms that the courts and jails use to let people out of jail, they just simply don't have the same benefits of what we do. And so by getting involved, the court system has a third party who is interested and has reason to make sure that the system moves along smoothly and that there's accountability. And so instead of just allowing the person who's releasing themselves out of jail to say, yeah, I promise I'll come back, there's actually somebody on the hook. And by not having it be mom, it allows the court to be a little more firm. I mean, if you have mom get son out of jail and then you put her out of her house, I mean, aren't you kind of defeating the purpose because you're still hurting the community?
Right.
But the business doing it, we can come in and be held accountable, and we can do it well. We can operate with a little less or a little different focus than the politicians have to. And so we come in, we help, we make sure people show up, and those that don't, they belong in jail. And so we make sure they get there, and that helps, and people see that over time there's an accountability, and slowly you can start seeing things start to get better.
It's so intriguing. I mean, I've never really thought about it that way, that really by putting a business or sort of activating capitalism in that standpoint, you have someone who actually has something really on the line. And so your business is kind of like encouraging people to like face up to justice in a lot of respects. It's not just, oh, well, I'm letting this guy off the hook, we're going to let these criminals into the streets to destroy the community. It's really saying, okay, this is a mechanism to help, build up the community, as well as a mechanism to help make sure that these people do face to the justice system and sort of abide by the laws of the city.
Absolutely, and sometimes it's not that the system doesn't want to, but look at just how overburdened somebody like the Detroit Police Department or Wayne County Sheriffs are. They just don't have the resources to go out there and go after every person who commits every minor offense. And so you end up with a scenario where you get people who have 15 or 20 outstanding warrants because they're for what the system would deem to be minor offenses, and so they can't dedicate thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to go out and arrest these people. And yet at the same time, imagine if you never punished your child for doing anything wrong, they would never learn accountability. And so you've got to have that balance where the police have to be able to focus on the truly bad things, but you still have to hold everyone else accountable too, and that's really the niche that we fill.
Well, I mean, you and I had some interesting conversations kind of in months past, and you had sort of mentioned to me that, the people that we would think are, getting out on bonds and things like that aren't necessarily people that, a regular person would consider criminals.
Right.
That basically all these resources are being utilized to keep people in jail that may have like a parking ticket or, too many parking tickets or something like that for whatever life circumstances that they might face. But, the court system is spending thousands and thousands of dollars trying to hold these people, incarcerate them or something like that. Can you talk to that, explain that to everyone? Because I thought that was a really interesting conversation we had.
Well, the first thing is you got to look at bond as an insurance. And so that's really what it is. And so the whole purpose of bond is to spread the risk and the cost over everyone who gets in trouble. And so sometimes people like to look at it individually and say, well, this person is paying this cost, and it's unfair because they were unjustly arrested or unjustly accused. But at the same time, that's kind of part of society's weight in spreading that risk and cost over everyone. And so just like insurance, we all have to carry auto insurance, not because I'm a good driver and you're a bad driver, but because we as society need to have something that takes place. And bail does the same thing. And what happens when it skews in one direction or the other is that you end up with people incarcerated when they just simply don't have the money or the means to get out. And so sometimes the system will turn on its head, and your everyday drug dealer has the money set aside to meet bond, and so they'll put up the $500 or $1,000 or $5,000 they have, because obviously it's part of doing business for them. Whereas somebody who didn't pay child support, or somebody who had 2 beers in an hour, you know, that's my example a lot of times, is 2 beers in 1 hour and you're over the limit.
Right.
And now you're in jail, and that doesn't make you a bad person, you just made a mistake. But if you then don't have the money to get out of jail, you're stuck there. And at the same time, the system doesn't know which of these people are going to go to court and which aren't. So just because you're a good person doesn't mean that you always go to court. I've had people fail to appear on no dog tag licenses. I've had people fail to appear on no fishing licenses. Sometimes it's just because they don't see it as a big deal. And then suddenly the city's investing thousands of dollars to get them back into court, and so it doesn't work out. And so you have to look at the system as an overall piece, and when it's functioning, it functions well, and it makes sure people go to court and they stand up, and justice is served, and justice can be served in a lot of ways. It doesn't always have to be with somebody going to jail.
Right, that's interesting. I mean, so you're saying if I have a dog or I don't have a fishing license, I can potentially be in a circumstance where I have to be put up for bail or else face jail time?
Sure, absolutely. If a parking ticket, if you don't go and pay that parking ticket, there's going to be a warrant issued for your arrest. And so the $30 parking ticket we get out front, if you don't pay it, they're going to issue a warrant for your arrest. Now, if you don't go take care of it, now they suspend your license. So now, a year from now, you get pulled over for running a stop sign, and not only are you arrested for the underlying ticket, but you're also arrested for the suspended license. And so now that $30 parking ticket has you sitting in jail on a more serious offense, all because you didn't pay the $30 ticket. And that's how things spiral downhill, and it's not necessarily a bad person. It's just something got out of control, and the system put them in that position.
Well, some of us know. I mean, I you know, being someone who's like in Detroit a lot, just like you are. I mean, I've gotten parking tickets before. I haven't even known that I've had them. I mean, I've gone on to pay one parking ticket and realized I've got like, you know, another 2 or 3 sitting up, and you know, that would be really terrible. I mean, just imagine me in jail. That'd be pretty bad to calling you.
And that's the whole point. And I mean, to be honest with you, most of our clientele are probably not much different than you and I, just placed in that scenario, and say, you know, maybe they did know and they just didn't have the money. A lot of our people are scared, you know. They get scared that if they don't have the money when they go in front of the judge, that they're going to be locked up. And so even though they may only owe $100, that's a lot of money to some people, and they don't know that the system will allow them and take that into consideration. And so sometimes the money that people pay us works more for us to guide them through the system than it is for the bail, because, you know, we deal with 5,000 people a year, and I know that if you go in front of X judge, he'll let you pay half down and $15 a week until it's paid off. They don't want you in jail any more than anyone else does, but the problem is when you don't take care of it, what other option do they have? And so that it's kind of the slippery slope.
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 things you got me thinking about. My dad has, he always mentioned that if he were to start a nonprofit, it would be something around what you're saying, actually, because he's known a lot of people like throughout the years, but where it's something small. I mean, it's something that, you know, a nonprofit could sort of address, where it's like, oh, you know, this guy owes like $100, you know, like, can we like, you know, get that and then have him pay it forward or something like that to other people? So that was one thing that I thought was a really interesting idea that my dad had, and I think he'll probably pursue it in the next few years. So we should probably like collaborate on that if there's any way possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I've absolutely thought of the same things. I mean, to be honest with you, what the system really needs is just to reevaluate what we arrest people for, and punishments that we can deal with. Because, like I said, I mean, you see so many people arrested, and what ends up getting them into trouble is that they then have to pay for the system, and so you see these massive fines, $5,000. And then suddenly you're on probation, and you're on probation for 10 years.
Right.
and they charge you for that, and you don't pay it. And then all of a sudden you have a scenario where you do something to get violated 7 years into your probation, and bam, now you're in a scenario where you can't get yourself out of it. And so, it's almost a cycle where somebody gets into it, and it's so tough to get out of it if you're in a low-income situation and you just don't have access to money. I mean, how do you get out of it? You try your best, you try to go out and do everything that you're supposed to do, but at the end, if they don't let you off probation until you pay the money, you never get off probation.
Yeah, what are you going to do exactly? So that's interesting. I mean, so like, if you don't mind, I know that you've been working on some ways to actually shift this, sort of innovate in this industry, which obviously hasn't been innovated in years. So, I mean, you have anything you want to share about the things that you guys are doing to leverage technology with with the sort of old industry?
Absolutely. I mean, that's something that we've talked about, you and I, a lot. In our business, it's an old business, been around for millennia, and really it's not much different than it was when it started. But with technology now, people are beginning to take a look at it a different way, and we're trying to do that and capitalize on that. So our ability to read people is much better using technology and algorithms and watching what they do, so that we can focus our resources on the very small percentage of clients that are really bad people. 95% of our clients are good people. They just made a mistake. And those people don't need a more rigid system to hold them accountable. They just have to basically make sure that they do what they're doing. On the other hand, nobody in my 15 years has ever told me, hey, I'm going to be the problem client. I'm not going to go to court. I'm not going to do my classes. I'm not going to deal with things. So we spend all of our time and all of our resources trying to figure out who those people are so that we can do our best to kind of guide them down the right path. And if we can't, then maybe the best place for them is jail. And utilizing technology to do that is vitally important because of the numbers that we deal with. In today's world, we bond out 5,000 people a year, and at any given point we have 1,000 people on bond, and we've got a staff of 25 people to monitor them. I mean, the numbers are just astronomical, and so we've got to have computers that help us to do these things. And we're starting to look at and begin to utilize cell phones and mobile apps and all of these things to help us better monitor these people so that the systems can notify us when we need to focus our limited human resources on something, because you never know for sure. And so you don't want a computer making the decision, but you got to have a live person. And if we've got 1,000 cases to look at, we need some way to cut that down and focus on 10 of them, and that's what computers are starting to help us do.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, you share with me some of your ideas. I won't talk about them right now, but it's just really interesting because, I mean, some of the things that you've shared with me in the past, it's kept me laying up at night, thinking about, because it's one of those industries where, unless you're really in it, I mean, a lot of people that are in tech, most likely haven't been to jail. If so, it's been something. I just don't think they had a lot of contact with this industry. So someone like you who has this sort of, aptitude to sort of think forward and sort of, have this sort of 10x mentality. Okay, well, I'm not only just going to, have my physical humans working on this. I'm going to develop technologies to actually make this industry better. It's such a very interesting mixture. And I mean, if any venture capitalists see this in the next few years, Bell-Bonds is right under Bamboo Detroit, so you should probably stop in. I mean, Justin may not want the money, but it's something very interesting to have a conversation with you about those things.
No, it is, because even politicians, nobody wants to talk about it because it's kind of the underbelly of society, and so nobody looks at it, and yet everyone can agree that it needs to be better. Well, if you don't want to talk about it, then how do you make it better? And so those of us who are in it and see it, I mean, whether it's systems like tethers that the jails and courts are using at obscene rates,
right?
They aren't any different than what they were in 1985 or 1990.
Right.
why. You know, if we've got a cell phone that can be this size, why do we have a tether that's this size? And you know, and
Yeah.
any sense, or a tether that you have to plug into the wall. I mean, so you've got a guy who's got to wear this thing for the next 5 years. In some cases, you may not even know, but they put people on tether for the rest of their life.
Wow.
There are certain offenses that you'll wear a tether for the rest of your life. Well, the difference between whether or not you've got to plug that thing in every 3 hours makes a difference to your life.
Yeah, absolutely. It's inhumane, really. I mean, to have to, be in that type of circumstances, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I mean, I've heard stories of people driving down the road, buying adapters in their cars so that they can charge it while they're driving. And I mean, what kind of scenario is that, where you're driving with your leg over here so you can charge it, all because you don't want it to die? Because if it dies, then it registers as a violation, and now suddenly you're violated and you start the cycle all over again.
Exactly. Now you're just caught back in this justice system, quote unquote, and it's abusing you, and it's inhumane. I mean, for a first world country, United States, hoorah rah. I mean, we've really got to figure out these issues, and I mean, is it different anywhere else, Justin? I mean, is Detroit specifically like bad, or is United States specifically bad, or are there any models out there in the world that we could look at and emulate?
Detroit is definitely a tough city. It actually tried to be very innovative in the late 70s, and just because the system they picked wasn't a great system, it turned out very poorly. But there are other cities that followed a very similar system. Philadelphia tried a similar system. Even Chicago tried a similar system. And so it wasn't like anything about Detroit was specifically bad. It was just the system that they picked. And that was one that relied essentially on the idea that people would just do it themselves. And so we're all naturally good people. And therefore, if we let everyone out, most of them will go to court. And it fails to understand the true insurance principle that, yes, those who are good will take care of business. But you still don't deal with the ones that are bad because
Right.
you have, spread the risk over enough people. As far as worldwide, you know what? I still believe that our system is the best out there. And if you compare it against European systems, I mean, you could say that the prisons could be better, sure. But as far as release, there really isn't anything better because our system is a very unique system. And a lot of people call for it to be changed and more Europeanized. But if you're the victim in a crime, why would you want it to be more Europeanized? Because the European system really depends on the idea that you want to take care of business. And that's great so long as you want to take care of business. But the second you don't, then you're done for. And so, yes, if you are arrested on a simple minor crime, then sure, there's nothing serious there. But then why should we arrest you? And
Right,
there,
exactly.
the problem of the argument is we shouldn't have a system that punishes people at different levels. We should have a system that only punishes people who do truly bad things. And so if we as society don't believe that the thing you're doing is wrong, then maybe we shouldn't arrest you, and then we don't have to worry about being more lenient on you and punishing you because, we're only arresting the people who are doing bad stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's the problem I think the system gets into is, arresting the 19-year-old kid who's smoking a joint behind the movie theater. I mean, half of society believes that should be legalized now, and yet you've got people in jail, and we're not talking about drug dealers killing people. We're talking about somebody who was stupid and smoked a joint outside. And so, that person, like I said, 50% of society believes that should be legalized now, so we don't need a more lenient punishment for this person.
We just need to decide that as a society we no longer think that is a crime. I mean,
Right.
I agree with that. I mean, seriously. I mean, especially in Detroit, in a city where we're so strapped for resources, it's time to really the pettiness and begin to focus in on things that actually matter. Like for instance, I just want to talk about this right now. This Brush Street thing with you and I and this parking issue is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in my life. They put this sign out saying no parking, no standing, whatever for for anyone basically. But yet as if it's an issue for society not to park there, right? But then all of a sudden now we have all these police officers, parking over crosswalks, and you may not want to comment on this because I know the business you're in, but parking over crosswalks and parking right in front of our building and things like this. And I find that to be criminal in some respects because it's like, that's an abuse of power by the people that we were paying to protect us. And that's just my opinion. I know Justin didn't say that, but I said it. So.
Just strictly as a business owner, I have 10 families a day who stop by my office, and it's difficult because where are they going to park? I have 15 employees, 15 who work out of this office, and one of the first questions that every one of them asks me is, where do I park?
Right.
And
Same thing for us too.
Yeah, what am I supposed to tell them? I can't cover parking for everyone, and so, they're now paying $5 a day just for the privilege to park and work in the city. And so, yeah, definitely that's a problem I'd love to see solved where we as businesses around here had some sort of parking. We don't have access to government parking, so those are, for government employees only. The closest we have is to walk over to Greektown, and yet you're still paying there, and then you got a several block hike up. And so, yeah, absolutely. I think the city has to solve a lot of those problems before it can really, really come back. But hopefully,
I agree with you. It's like this street was probably built. Brush was probably made 3 lanes for a larger population in Detroit, and obviously it's not causing any issues. There are never really any traffic jams in front of our building ever, except for when there are games going on. And it's just, I don't know. I'm personally agitated by the fact that they put the sign up, and then all of a sudden now we just have more police cars parking in front of us. Not to mention that this is the Michigan, what do you call it, Michigan State Police. Like they just leave their cars on. with the air conditioning running. Even though the doors are locked, and they just leave the cars on for hours. That type of stuff. That type of stuff like really upsets me because it's like we're trying to move the needle forward for this entire city. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. I had a scenario a couple years ago. One of the first Monday night football games we had down here, and they shut down the street, and it was a big party. Everybody was having fun, and so we put a tent outside, and we were handing out beads and T-shirts and just going along with the fun. And eventually, an officer comes by and tells us we've got to shut our tent down.
Yeah.
And what's the deal? Why? There's tents all over. Well, what the deal is we had put our tent on the street in front of our office here. And now, the street, and there's that lane where everybody parks in. And so
Right.
it was right in there with the cars. It wasn't sticking out or anything like that. And the street was essentially shut down anyways. But for whatever reason, they didn't want us to have it, and they made us take it down and said if we didn't, that they'd ticket us and everything else. It just makes no sense. Things like that where, you've got tents everywhere, parties everywhere, and, sometimes people don't think about, the good that you're doing, and you're giving away things, and we're barbecuing and giving away stuff and trying to give back, and they shut us down right in the middle of it. So, but, I agree. I think the city needs to think a little bit about its treatment of local businesses and realizing that, sometimes rules are rules and they're there to really protect things, and sometimes maybe rules need to be changed. Or
just not enforced. There were tons of rules on books.
Maybe clear them out. One of the examples I use is that it is illegal in Detroit on Sundays for, I think, a woman to slap a guy or something like that. Maybe to wear a hat. Something ridiculous. It's on the books. And so, in theory, a police officer could come along and arrest you for wearing a hat on Sundays. That doesn't need to be there. It shouldn't be there, and somebody's going to misuse that at some point. And, if we cleared that stuff up, we wouldn't have the problem that we've been talking about all this time with having to make punishments more lenient because, it just doesn't need to be there. And just the same as me having a tent in the street. It was something about a tent in a street, but clearly it was a parking lane, and yet it was between the sides, and so he said, listen, if you don't move it, we're going to give you a ticket.
Yeah. So, how do we fix that in our sort of in the justice system that we have set up? Is there any any thoughts you have on sort of how citizens can speak up and actually get some of those things heard so that we can get the legislature to change things?
I think that the most important thing is to have people force it to be an issue. And so, you know, I mean, being around politics and being involved in this, the politicians talk to the issues that people make them talk to. And, you know, it's kind of why citizens always get talked to, because they vote. And so because they vote, their issues are heard.
Right.
And the problem is that the people who get tied up in the judicial system typically aren't voters. And so they don't go out and vote judges, they don't go out and vote prosecutors, they don't go out and vote representatives. And so very rarely is it talked about. On the other hand, those who want to be extremely tough on crime, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't be tough, I'm just saying that, you know, we have to be more pragmatic about it and make sure that our resources are used appropriately. You know, and if people voted more and made it an issue, we'd be able to discuss these things more. And instead of sitting and spending time on whether or not, you know, we're going to have another ceremonial flag, let's figure out whether or not, you know, we should be releasing people on tether without anyone overseeing them, or should we even be releasing people accused of tether or accused of murder on tether? Do we need to require people to be ticketed for marijuana, or should they be arrested, or nothing at all? You know, those are the things that, you know, and they vary from city to city. Up in Flint, you might only get a citation for possession of marijuana up to an ounce. Down here in the city, I believe you don't get cited at all. And so there's such a wide variance of what is enforced. That's where you end up having problems, because, you know, it's so all over the place that, you know, suddenly you go into Warren and you have a little bit of drugs on you, you're going to prison. You come down here to the city, you're not even getting stopped. So
yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, you go through red lights and things. Actually, they're cracking down on that, but I mean, I know what you mean. I mean, it's very interesting stuff. It's giving me an idea. Maybe we could create a platform for that, really, just for people to voice their concerns versus. I mean, you know, there's this old thing where people used to write their senator, write their, you know, congressman, all this type of stuff. I mean, why can't you just upvote it like online or something like that? Like, here are the issues, and the issues that are, like, you know, upvoted to the top. You know, maybe it's, you know, compiled with all the signatures, sent off to, like, you know, someone or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I always say that if people really knew how the system worked, I mean, they would never stand for it. And it's not just the prisons and the situation there, but I mean, our local courts and jails. I mean, if they knew the people that were released every day out of these jails, I mean, they would never stand for it. But people don't know, and to be honest with you, I think a lot of them don't.
I lost you there, Justin. I lost your sound. I lost your sound. I don't know. Has anything changed over there?
To me.
You know, I lost the last thing you said. You said that, you know, if a lot of people knew what the issues were, they wouldn't
stand for it.
They wouldn't stand for it, and a lot of them don't care. Is that what you were saying?
Yes. Essentially, that you know, a lot of people that I've talked to over the years. I mean, I've never spoken with somebody who knew the things that I said, and those people who found out what I said seemed as though they had their eyes opened. But at the same time, I've never seen any of them ever really go out there and do it. And I've spoken to state representatives, state senators. I mean, anybody who will lend me an ear, I'll talk to. It's just, you know, and yet it's one of our biggest budgets here in the state. You know, the judicial system, the corrections system, it's multi-billion dollars. And yet, look at how much public resources we spend on talking about the issues and seeing what the public wants to do with it.
It's interesting. That's very interesting. Yeah, well, I mean, I look forward to seeing some of the things you do, Justin. I know that you got to, we had talked earlier that you have to kind of get going, but I'm going to, this has been very interesting. I mean, I hope this interview has opened a lot of people's eyes, because, I mean, every time you and I talk, I'm always learning something new about kind of the way the judicial system works, as well as like how that sort of, those issues kind of fit into Detroit, and Detroit specifically, because it's very interesting. Is there anything else you want to say? Like, is there any way people can contact with you, or?
Well, you know, the one thing I want to leave it on is I do think that city is on the right direction. You know, I mean, for as much as I want to talk about how people don't listen, there are absolutely some people who are starting to listen, and changes are starting. You know, you can see them now,
Right.
and the courts here locally, we've been able and we fight to get it, but there's starting to be accountability there. They're starting to see the difference. The sheriff, you know, I was a strong supporter of his, and you know, he's listened to some of our issues, and so I do think there are some good people in place. We just need more of them, and those that are listening and acting need to be rewarded with more time in their positions. So, you know, the more people look and the more they ask and the more that they educate themselves is very important. As far as me, you know, I'm obviously here on Brush with you. If anybody needs to reach me, they can reach me at my email address, which is justin.butler, B-U-T-L-E-R, at uwalkbailbondagency.com. That's YOUWALKBAILBONDAGENCY.com, or you can call us at 877-U-WALK. That's YOUWALK.
That's great branding. I love it. Well, yeah, and I agree with you completely. And I'm just going to say, too, you know, even though we're talking about some of the issues, and I'm talking to a lot of people like through Detroit, I'm very pro Detroit. I'm very much like I think that a lot of positive things are happening. But the reason we wanted to start this is just to get some sort of thought leaders and sort of people who are actioneers, like we call them in Detroit, like on a show, so we can encourage more people to sort of listen up and say, hey, listen, these are real businesses that are operating in Detroit. These are real people doing really interesting things, and give people the opportunity to connect with you, meet up with you, or anything like that. So
Absolutely.
I really appreciate it. Again, Justin, I hope. Go ahead. Did you have something else to say?
I was just gonna say I love it, and like I said, I mean, we literally closed down, you know, 3/4 of the stuff outside of the state over the last 2 years just to focus here. You know, in the 5 years that we've been here, the difference is amazing. I mean, they're starting to build stuff here. Like I said, I tell everybody about it, and everybody who wants to bash the city, I mean, you know, I tell them to come down and take a look. You know, for all the things we've got to fix, there's a million more that have already been fixed.
Yeah, it's like my dad always said that Detroit was always like a, you know, a hidden jewel. You know, it's like it's on international waters. You know, there's a lot of fresh food everywhere. They're great people, and I mean, I feel that same way too. So.
Absolutely. So I love being involved with these things, and I'll, you know, anybody who needs my support and anything to help this city, I'm always there. So don't hesitate to contact me, something like that either.
Okay, excellent. All right, everybody, we really appreciate you guys tuning in again today. Of course, everything that you're seeing right now is on our website at bamboodetroit.com and on our YouTube page. Everything's going to be coming up live here in the next few weeks. So we'll be creating a beautiful library of these types of interviews. And I really appreciate everyone tuning in who was watching live, as well as those people that are going to watch this like inside of the YouTube channel. So again, if you need to contact Justin, just rewind, listen to his information. If you need to contact me, again, I'm Brian at bamboodetroit.com. And yeah, just if you have any suggestions or anything like that, email us and let me know anything you think we could do better. All right, appreciate it, and thank you, Bamboo Nation. We will see you guys on the flip side. See you later. Bye, Justin.